I'm afraid he's not here. You can come in and wait. Ah, nuts, how can he not be here? The man in the doorway recovered from her outburst admirably. Well, he did say he'd be coming, and everything is paid for.
It is? As had often been the case since moving to New York 8 months ago, things went from terrible to wonderful in the space it took to flutter a lash. Of course, it changed back just as fast. She grabbed the worn black bag containing all her possessions and hurried into the lobby of the apartment block. The gentleman, a stately sort with grey hair and whiskers, led her towards a ground floor room. An elevator stood at the back of the hallway, beside a set of stairs, and the doors swished open. A blonde woman around 30 got out, her hat at a strange angle and jacket dishevelled, and walked silently out the front double doors. Dolly was glad she hadn't said hello. She doubted if the woman, obviously drunk on bathtub gin, would have noticed. The grey gentleman opened her door, revealing a modest room. With the rent overdue on her Greenwich Village place, however, it was a palace to Dolly. There was a bed and a desk for typing. What more would she need? Oh boy, she sighed, this is just swell. Pleased you like it, the gentleman grinned. I'll leave you to unpack. If you need me, I'm right beside you. He pointed to the next door. Just ask for Donald. Sure thing. Dolly shut herself in and dived onto the bed, waiting for a nap that didn't come. Instead, she set her things about the room, beginning with a pristine 1921 copy of the Smart Set, her reason for coming to the city. Surely, she told her parents, once you get one story published, others will follow. Instead, she found herself slaving as a telephone operator, sending out manuscript after manuscript with nothing to show for it. Still, with her paycheck, she could at least go to the Ziegfeld Follies or the movies. She pulled out a photo of a young man in a second-hand jacket, his untamed hair in a vague side parting. Her best, her only friend in the city, Charlie. They'd drunk highballs all night at the Redhead, pretending to be sophisticated, and gone for hash browns at sunrise. Seeing him now reminded Dolly that she was too far away to just pop by his place, not without taking the subway. She swallowed hard. This break was for her own good. She'd finish her book and be the toast of the town. She paused to read almost every book she pulled out, dragging out half an hour's work to almost 2 hours, finally placing her typewriter on the desk and sitting in the hard chair. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and the mumbling began. Of course she pressed her ear to the wall but couldn't make out a word. It didn't sound like the fleeting mutters of a person preparing to go out, rather the full-blown conversation of a lunatic. After a while she gave up and typed, imagining compliments at parties and upturned faces at readings. The day darkened and Dolly switched on the light. Donald's door creaked through the wall, his steps clumping into the lobby. They paused while he rattled something and turned a lock across the hall. Dolly listened to the shuffling of not just his feet, but another's shambling into the elevator, and Dolly assumed he must be taking an elderly inmate for some air on the rooftop. Dolly grabbed her keys, headed towards the communal phone, and dialed the operator. Charlie's hungover voice made her think of crusty mythical beasts lurking at the bottom of the sea. "Hello, Buddy Crumpo." "Hello, Chip Frelick," she replied, thinking on her feet for the game of made-up characters they always played. "They sound like gadabouts who terrorised the local village in their motor car." Dolly laughed. "They do. Say, did I just wake you? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you eating?" "Me? You eat less than I do." "Well..." Dolly stared down the gloomy corridor. The stairs were almost completely hidden. She didn't want to take her eyes from them, as though something might happen if she looked away. A girl's got to watch her figure. "How did you know it was me?" I guessed it was about cabin fever time. Dolly sighed. What did you do last night? Oh, he sounded guilty. Just went for a couple. You know, nothing too crazy. That's not fair, Dolly said, only half joking. While I'm stuck here, you have to stay in and cry the whole time. A door slammed above and Dolly gripped the phone. A pale woman now stood at the top of the steps, her dress looking as if it had been worn several days in a row. Well, that's why I had to go out, of course, to recover from my loss. Oh, darn, you'll never guess who I saw. Not now, sorry, Dolly half whispered. She raised her voice to the woman. I won't be a second. What's that, rub neighbours? I'll say. Dolly couldn't look away from the taut, white face. Look, why don't I call tomorrow? Sure thing, and when you're back we'll terrorise the village. With bells on. The next morning Dolly woke as though something had prodded her. The yank from her dreams always upset her, but now she missed the sleep state with violence. She made a note for a story idea. Employment positions for sleeping people, perhaps as storefront mannequins or fancy rugs. She dressed and snacked on Cracker Jacks, sitting at her desk to stare at what she had written yesterday. Perhaps she had spent too much time imagining the Pulitzer. She unrolled the paper, placed in a clean sheet, and the mumbling began again next door. Every so often he paused before giving exasperated rebuttals, but a reply was never audible. She thought of the woman upstairs and made up her mind to explore. As she climbed the stairs, she had the sudden urge to go back to her room and forget the whole thing. She decided that if she was nearer the bottom than the top, she would do just that, but a glance behind proved she had to continue. She reached the first door and knocked gently. The woman was still in her nightgown when she answered. Oh, golly, I'm awful sorry, said Dolly. Oh, don't worry about it, she said. It's my day off. I haven't gotten round to making myself human yet. Dolly laughed. I'm new in the block. I guess I'm just introducing myself. Nice to meet you. The woman held out her hand and Dolly shook it. Here for long? No, just a couple weeks. My friend lives here. He said I could stay while I write. Friend was stretching it. She'd met Fred at work and they barely spoke, so it was a surprise when he offered his place while he was away. A writer, said the woman. No kidding. Dolly knew she was being kind. New York was full of writers. This place ain't mine, neither. Apparently it was a real state only last year, and it had been for a long time. The owner must have come into some money or something. My good friend said he was getting married and wanted someone to take care of his room while he honeymooned. Can you believe it? Getting married and not even telling his friends he was engaged. She tried to laugh, to look as if she were kidding around, but it didn't quite work. Her eyes were too sad. Well, if you ever feel like a nip to warm your toes, you know where I am. I'm April. Say, thanks, I'm Dolly. Charlie would like her, she thought. Perhaps she ought to introduce them. The next to answer the door was the distracted blonde from the elevator. Yes? Dolly's throat constricted. Hi, I'm new around here and... Yes? The woman looked as if she had to solve a puzzle in 5 minutes or something terrible would happen. I mean, it's no big deal. I just wanted to say hello. Okay, I'd better get on. The woman shut the door before Dolly could finish. She felt a little sick from the Cracker Jacks, but pressed on, this time meeting a man, slightly overweight and losing his hair. Hi there, said Dolly. I'm new and... She paused. The man was staring past her. She turned, but saw nothing. The back of her head felt exposed. His eyes were unfocused, and she realised he must be blind. Just saying hi, you know. Wanted to meet some good eggs. He was silent, his face occasionally spasming like a baby not yet in control of its muscles. He blinked, the skin rubbing dryly over the orbs. Dolly backed away. Well, must be off. Lots of work to do. She sprinted down the stairs, sticking to the banister so as not to tread on any creaks and alert Donald. She kept to her room for the rest of the day, typing nonsense to sound busy. Once more Donald ascended the stairs, and she typed until she was certain he was on the landing above, then wedged a box in her doorway to keep it from slamming, and snuck out. She could just see the top of his head from below. His keys rattled, and another head joined him, the balding man. "That's it," she heard Donald. "This way." And the pair shuffled from view. She heard the elevator whoosh and more shuffling, then nothing for several minutes. She had almost forgotten she was supposed to be spying when the footsteps marched back down towards the stairs. Donald's grey hair was in view, and, her heart distending, she scurried back to her room and tripped over the box, landing hard on her knee. She kicked the box and locked the door. "What's the matter?" called Donald. "You've no need to be frightened. I just took Mr. Rollins to the rooftop. He likes it up there." Dolly couldn't reply. Breathing was hard enough to manage. "All right, take care." It was night before she cracked the door and peered into the hallway. It was silent, empty. Not even the dust was active. She tiptoed to the phone. Why, if it isn't Madame Frumblepotts, wife of the Army General and Queen of the... Dolly held the earpiece away. Charlie's voice was so loud it pinged off the walls. "Can we be serious a minute?" "Say," said Charlie in mock hurt, "what gives? You're not turning into a killjoy, are you?" "No," Dolly was losing patience. "I'm just a little worried." "Don't like your new place, huh?" Dolly snorted. "You don't know the half of it." He didn't reply, and she was seized with a momentary terror. "Charlie?" "Sorry, Peach, can't seem to get this drawing for Hartley's beer right." "Can you please listen a moment? I think something's going on." "What, is the landlord Nosferatu or something?" "Stop it." Dolly couldn't keep the sharpness from her voice. "Oh, don't be that way." "Sorry, I don't know. I think I'm through with this place. I don't want to stay here anymore." "So, come back." "Come on, I'm worried." It sounded like an offer she should accept. She opened her mouth to do just that, when April hummed upstairs as she pottered about her room. "Oh, just ignore me. I'm being silly." "Okay, if you're sure." Dolly opened her mouth to speak when she saw the pale woman at the top of the stairs again, reminding her of a dusty moth corpse she found once under her desk. She swallowed dryly. "Dolly? Hello? Dolores?" Charlie's voice crackled from the earpiece. "Nothing," said Dolly. "Okay, I'll call you when I'm home." She hung up, not hearing the reply. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," the woman answered in a voice like fog. "I need to make a phone call." "It's free now." The blonde woman held onto the banister tightly, her foot feeling for the step below like a toddler. Dolly gave herself a mental slap, trotted up the stairs and placed a hand on the woman's elbow, earning a violent, wide-eyed stare. "Hey, take it easy, I'm here to help." Eventually the woman seemed to forget Dolly's presence and continued her journey, Dolly by her side. They reached the bottom, and she listened surreptitiously to the woman giving a number to the operator, then stiffly greeting someone. "The room's paid up for a couple weeks. I'd rather someone was here to watch it while I'm away." The exact words Fred had used. It had to be a coincidence. Dolly had gone on holiday to a nut house by accident, that was it. Or she'd wandered into a rest home for the terminally weird. She lay in bed for hours until sleep came. The next morning her head felt full of sand or mud or some such unpleasantness. All night the room had compressed about her like a squeezing hand, the walls and floor creaking with life. At the time she'd been sure it was no dream, but now, As the weakening sun shone through the net curtains, she knew it couldn't be true. Still dressed, she ate a fistful of macaroons and washed them down with orange juice. Still thirsty, she opened another bottle, then another. She remembered her attempt at alcoholism during her first week in New York. Determined, she'd pinched her nose whilst pouring down a whiskey sour, only to bring it back up 10 minutes later. She was grateful now that her little experiment had failed. She busied herself with writing, the words fighting through cobwebs to reach the page. By the time evening arrived, she had barely written a couple of paragraphs. Frustrated and needing to grab reality, she headed up to April's. Her worry muscles untwisted when April answered the door. "Why, if it ain't my new buddy, how are you doing?" Dolly eyed the other's dishevelled appearance. "You off work today?" "Yeah." April glanced distractedly at her watch. "I'm sick. Excuse the mess. You must think I'm a slob." "Course not," Dolly laughed, though when she entered the musty room she couldn't believe how much stuff could be crammed into one place, and mostly on the floor. I will tidy it soon. I don't know. The last few days have got on top of me, I guess." Dolly flopped onto the bed, a cloud of dust coughing into the air. So, how are you liking it here? It's a little odd, don't you think?" "Odd?" April frowned. "No, not really." And that was that. Dolly scraped her mind for conversation. "So, are you okay?" "Me?" April went from staring into the middle distance to making vague eye contact. "I'm swell." "Okay," Dolly rose. "I gotta go. I got a ton of writing to do." "Sure," said April, but didn't look up. Dolly was wrapped in a bag of thoughts as she headed downstairs, screeching when she bumped into Donald. "My goodness," said Donald. "I'm terribly sorry." "No, I should apologise, really." She gave a sharp, embarrassed laugh. Donald smiled dutifully. "Well, I should—" "Of course." They parted, and Dolly sauntered as nonchalantly as she could to her room. She opened and closed her door, but remained in the lobby, staring up, keeping out of sight. She heard Donald's keys upstairs. Was it April's room? No. She saw his grey hair and a blonde head bobbing after him. Again the swoosh of the elevator doors. She opened the white door of the ground floor elevator and pulled aside the cage, almost pressing the top floor before yanking her hand back. No, not this way, he'd see. She located the fire escape door and stepped onto the metal terrace. It was cold. Autumn was definitely arriving, and people in the street rushed to see the latest picture or Broadway play. She could, she supposed, grab her things and go home, and she hopped from foot to foot as though letting them decide. She climbed the ladder to the next level, and the next, until she reached the top. Shaking, knowing somehow that whatever she was about to see could ruin her life, she poked her head over the rim of the wall. The evening drew in over the rooftop, where Donald and the blonde woman stood, but Dolly could just make out her twitching and grinning face like the bald man's before her. Donald patted the woman's arm, holding her gently in place. The blonde's eyes were as empty as a hatched spider's nest. "That's it," muttered Donald. "Almost time." There was a strong gust of wind, and the blonde's head broke free from her neck. There was no blood, no gore, and she apparently felt nothing. Her expression as it floated upwards was blank, a grey husk. The wind carried it higher, higher, until it drifted over the rooftops and out of sight. The body remained, stiff and withered but standing. Donald continued patting her arm uselessly. He heard Dolly's whimper and looked up. She raced down the ladders and her foot slipped, sending her crashing through the air and landing on the sidewalk with a skull-rattling thump. "You're okay, I got you," said someone. A man she didn't know. She grimaced against the pane, focusing on the stars above. Over the rooftops, a tiny, grey dot bobbed like a dandelion seed, finally floating through the window of the next building.
"They're spreading," she mumbled as she was lifted towards the ambulance. But nobody heard.